The definition of a generation. A generation is the aggregate of people born within a span of about 20 years, right? It's literally the length of one phase of life. So if you think about it, childhood, young adulthood, midlife, old age, etc. We all share that time together, which is what makes us a generation. Generations have 3 criteria that they share. 3. The first thing is that they share an age, location, and history. So what that means is that a generation encounters the same historical event in the same phase of life. Right? So in other words, I'll give you an example. Let's talk about 9/11 for a second, okay? Raise your hand if you remember exactly where you were when 9/11 happened. Absolutely. You can probably envision yourself in the room remembering exactly where you were. If you do not remember 9/11 and where you were, meaning you didn't read about it in a book, you remember it, then you are not a millennial, you're not a Gen Xer, you're not a baby boomer, you're not a traditionalist or anything else. You are a Gen Z member. Right? I remember vividly where I was when 9/11 happened. I'm going to age myself, but I was sitting in my high school classroom. Right? How many of you were in high school? Anybody? Okay, it's just me. Now, there's like 4 of us. 4 of us were in high school when it happened, and I remember very vividly my teacher rolled this thing out. Yeah, you remember these. If you don't remember these, you are not a millennial or older. You are a Gen Z member. I remember my teacher rolled this out. She plugged it in, and we watched the most horrific thing occur in American history. Last criteria that generations share is they have this sense of common perceived membership, right? We all are proud to be a part of our generation. We think that our generation is the best generation. Can we just be honest? I'm a millennial. I think millennials are the best, and I'll say it with pride. I think millennials are the best generation, but you would disagree, right? Exactly, I know you would. I know you would. I'll prove it to you. There's an entire movement online with people talking about the experiences of their generation versus other generations. How about this? I don't know if you've seen this online or not, but listen, there's a generation that will never, ever know what it's like to be angry on a phone and be able to channel that energy in slamming the phone. It's just not the same when you just push a button it's not the same, right? This poor generation, they'll never know. So we say things like that. My Xers and my baby boomers in the room, this was going to mean something to you. This next one, okay? Millennial, somebody had to explain this to me. You're probably like, you're like, you don't know workplace communication. What do you mean you have a hard time communicating with your customers and your clientele? Listen, there was a time, right, where if you missed a call or you missed a note or you missed a message, you had to find out on a manila envelope. There wasn't a voicemail or a text message app, right? And my boomers are going to appreciate this one. You know AMC and Regal, we now got the reclining seats in the movie theaters, right? Yeah, my boomers are like, we had the original reclining seats, okay? The original reclining seats, right? Drive-in movies. So you're probably sitting in your seat feeling this nostalgia around your generation. That makes you a generation. You experience these things together at the same time in the same phase of life. I like to break it down because for those critics who say that generations don't exist, I beg to differ, and here's why. We talked about a generation being a phase of life, right? So we all go through these phases of life. We experience childhood, we experience youth, adulthood, old age if we're lucky. We all experience these things. So why aren't we all the same? Because of these environmental factors that come into play, right? So it depends on what's happening in our social world. It depends on what's happening in our political world and technology. Those things, the way we encounter and experience those factors are what makes us different as generations, right? I want you to imagine the political environment of today and how that's going to shape the way Gen Z, your kids probably, some of your grandkids, are going to experience politics in the future. What are they going to think? How are they going to interact with politics because of what they're experiencing now? If you think about it, let's talk about maybe an environmental factor, right? My baby boomers may remember a time where you could smoke a cigarette in the daycare. Sandy, why are you clapping? Sandy's over there clapping. You may remember a time where you could smoke a cigarette in the daycare or even in the hospital. For us, we didn't grow up in that norm, right? So if I see somebody even smoking a cigarette in the hall, I'm judging them. Let's just be honest, right? So we have these different factors that then shape our experiences, making us different as a generation than the other. Baby boomers, where y'all at? Where are my boomers? Come on. How many of you are here? It's like 3 of you. Oh, I love boomers. My mom was a boomer. So boomers, no shade, I promise. I love boomers. They have a special place in my heart. So boomers are between 55 and 73. They were born between 46 and 64. Famous boomer you may know, Miss Oprah Winfrey. J-Lo, you know who J-Lo is. J-Lo is a member of Gen X. Where are my Gen Xers? Oh, they're heavy in here. All right, Gen X, I love you too. Gen X was born between 65 and 79. They are currently between 40 and 54. Not to date you, okay? There's a lot of y'all in here. I don't want to get jumped. Millennials, where are my millennials at? Woo! Oh, there's only a few of us. We got to work on our generational diversity in here. Okay, so millennials are between the ages of 24 and 39. Raise your hand if you're surprised to hear that millennials are almost 40. Yeah, can we guess, we're grown. We are no longer 10, okay? And I'll talk a little bit more about that a little later, all right? We were born between 80 and 95. And then this last generation, the generation that many of you probably have children that represent, it's called Generation Z. They're also known as centennials, right? You'll probably hear them called Generation Z far more than centennials. Generation Z was born between 96 and 2012. They're currently 6 years of age to 23. Right? It's a wide gap, right? And then as you can see, there is another generation, right? Because there are humans on this earth that are younger than 6. The issue is we don't know what they're going to be called, right? They have not been given a name. Maybe they'll be Generation AA. I don't know. But right now, they're just called kids. That's it. They're kids. So while you do that, I'd like for you to pull out your phones real quick. Yeah, I'm a millennial, so we're using technology throughout my keynote here. So pull out your phones, and I want you to text. Go to your text messaging app. Boomers, if you need a tutorial, I'm glad to come down. Go. Oh, I love you. I told you. All right, go to your text messaging app. So here are a couple facts about boomers. Boomers grew up with fewer rules than their traditionalist parents or grandparents, right? So it gave them just a little bit of wiggle room, if you will. So they'll push back on authority like their parents never did. They still, though, when it comes to the workforce, follow rules and protocol. Right? They grew up in the workforce when it was very important to play by the rules. If it was written, we follow that. Baby boomers live to work. If you disagree and you're a baby boomer, raise your hand. Let's just be honest. Exactly. They live to work. When it comes to work and hard work, they view hard work as visibility, right? As seeing you. If you're not in the office, you're not working. If you're not on the floor, you're not working. I saw this play out all the time in my days of leading route salespeople, right? The number one value for a baby boomer is hard work, period. If you're not working hard, they're going to question your dedication. They're going to question your authority, and they're going to have a hard time trusting you as a leader. Xers grew up in a time where mom was at work. Mom was at work. Dad was at work too, but the divorce rate was actually higher than it had ever been before. So a lot of Xers grew up in single-parent homes, which makes them super duper independent. And I'll talk about that just a little later. They grew up with MTV, right? MTV was finally coming into play. This is why Xers think they're so cool. They still think they're cool. It is nothing. All right, I forgot y'all 60% of the room. I got to take it easy on you. I got to take it easy. You are cool. You are cool. You are cool. All right. Video games became a thing when Gen Xers were small. HIV became a thing, right? I think we just have to consider the environment in which we grew up in when it comes to the traits the behaviors we exhibit even in the workforce, right? So Gen X has a reputation of being super cynical, super pragmatic, very skeptical of everything. Could it be that it has something to do with the times in which they grew up in, right? Latchkey kid is. Who grew up as a latchkey kid? Several. What is a latchkey kid, sir? Well, as an Xer, you got home, you let yourself into the house, you made yourself a snack, you were responsible for doing your own homework, getting it done, and if you had a sibling, you were responsible for helping them with their homework and getting them a snack. And maybe if mom was working late, you then had to start dinner. You were supposed to be doing all that as a kid. But really, you were watching MTV, and you know you were. You were really watching MTV. And you know what? Xers are super independent. They're super self-reliant, even in the workforce. Where do you think that comes from? Their time as a latchkey kid, right? Super independent. They didn't need a lot of help. They were self-sufficient. The same applies when they come into the workforce. Family time is really important. Gen X was the first generation. Millennials, we have Gen X to thank for this. Gen X was the first generation to prioritize and push for work-life balance. So thank you, Gen X. We appreciate you. We thank you. Right? Why do you think family time is important to you as an Xer? Because you didn't have it, right? You didn't have it. So your priority is now to give your kids what you didn't grow up with. And I think that that's awesome. It's fair. It's the way you show up. So therefore, you work to live. You don't live to work like baby boomers, right? Balance. They value autonomy, right? When it comes to an Xer, they really don't need anybody breathing down their throat. They just need a little bit of elbow room, right? Check in when you need to. When I need you, I'll come to you and ask my question. But outside of that, I just need a little flexibility. I'm good. Why? Because they grew up self-reliant, self-sufficient. So when it comes to leadership, micromanaging does not work for an Xer. If you agree, say amen. Amen. I know, and you value your career over company. Super confident too. Helicopter parents. Raise your hand if you are a helicopter parent. Just self-identify. It's okay. It's a safe space. It's a safe space. We're not going to judge you. Thank you, sir. I appreciate you. Somebody's honest in the room. Let's just be honest. A lot of the baby boomers in this room were helicopter parents. Millennials grew up with helicopter parents, meaning they grew up with this kind of overlooming God almost that just moved mountains on your behalf. And anytime you had an issue, they intervened. If the teacher gave you a bad grade, they rushed over to the teacher and told them off, right? Yeah. If you're a baby boomer and you've ever told your children that they can come to you about anything, raise your hand. Yeah. If you're a baby boomer and you ever told your children that this is a safe space and that you are in control of your own destiny, raise your hand. Yeah, you did, right? So when a millennial comes into your workplace and they expect attention and they expect feedback and they expect the world to be given to them on a platter, and they expect for you to intervene for them as your manager, as their manager, why are we surprised? Why are we surprised? What I'm saying is you did it. It's your fault. You did it. You raised us to be this way. Millennials lived in work, right? Work is a means to an end for them. They really want to just retire now and just go to Bali and live. Yeah, Bali is the priority. You just got to understand that. You got to know that. But for them, getting the job done is important. For them, hard work is not an unseen thing. It's just that they interpret it differently. Right? Hard work to them is not visibility. Hard work is productivity. It's getting the job done. So why do you have to see me in order for me to do my work? That's the way that they see it. They're tech dependent, right? So a millennial is tech savvy. We do remember a time in our lives where tech was not there. But Generation Z, not at all. They are tech dependent. They will not separate from their phones for more than 3 seconds. It just won't happen, right? It won't happen. They are super passionate, which is why inclusion for them is so vital. When it comes to Generation Z, the number one factor, based on a study that was recently done, the number one factor that tells you whether they're going to trust an organization or not is equality. Equality. So they care, and they will let you know that they care. And they've got the girth and the size to push until they can't push anymore, and they will knock your organization over if you are not inclusive, but you say you are. So that one's important. Is they're self-taught, right? YouTube is their number one source of advice. So if you're not having the talk, okay, they're getting it off YouTube, I promise. So you gotta have those talks, all right? It's important. YouTube is their number one university. They will sit in a classroom and YouTube what their teacher just told them to validate it. So in closing, as I wrap up, when it comes to really leveraging generational diversity, we've talked about a lot of things, right? At the end of the day, there are only a couple of things that we really, really have to do. We have to increase our empathy and awareness around the generational differences. We have to, right? We can no longer sit in organizations and not understand these factors that make us different and why. So there are a number of things that we can do. We can create cross-generational ERGs. We can do generational trainings, right? I happen to know a great generational trainer for you, okay? But we've got to make sure. You caught that? Yeah, a couple steps after. So we have to make sure that we're creating empathy and awareness around these generational differences, okay? The next thing is we have to exercise intentionality when we're creating our teams, our special projects, when we're creating our task forces to make sure that we have generational diversity and generational inclusion, right? We have people at the table who have the authority and the power of different generations to make decisions. We already saw the impact of that. The last key to really leveraging generational difference is we have to create some safe spaces in which generations, all generations, feel welcomed and appreciated, right? And you as leaders have to create that change, and you have to create those safe spaces and be agile enough to move organizations forward. Thank you for your attention. I appreciate it.